Welcome back to Ohio Counseling Conversations, the official podcast of the Ohio Counseling Association, bringing you updates and conversations from around the state. On today's episode, we continue our Meet the President series with an OCA past president and upcoming president-elect of the American Counseling Association, Dr. Christine Suniti Bhat. Dr. Bhat is a counselor educator and department chair at Ohio University and will begin her term this summer as president-elect and then serve as the 73rd president of ACA beginning July 1st, 2024. Bringing her own lived experience as a first-generation South Asian immigrant in the United States, Dr. Bhat shares her passion for recognizing and honoring diversity, as well as her passion for the profession and how we can operate from positive frameworks to support our clients and give them hope. As always, I'm your host today, Dr. Marissa Cargill, a counselor from Cuyahoga Community College and counselor educator at the University of Akron. Thank you so much for listening. We're glad you're here. Welcome, Chris. We're so excited to have you at Ohio Counseling Conversations. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are
It's great to be here.
Incredibly excited to have a president-elect of American Counseling Association, former Ohio Counseling Association president, joining us on the podcast today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your upcoming experience.
All right. So I'm not sure, Marissa, if you wanted me to go into a little bit about my background.
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, great. Well, currently I'm professor and chair at the Ohio University Counselor Education and Supervision Program, and I have been here since 2006, a proud Ohioan and a proud OCA member for most of the time that I've lived here. And just a little bit about myself. Before I came to the US, I originally lived in Bangalore, India, or Bengaluru as it's now known. This is a very large city in South India. This is where I was born and raised. And my family and I immigrated to Australia in the 1990s. We spent some years there. And then I came to the USA, actually to Ohio University, to do my PhD in counselor education and supervision. And I've been in love with Ohio ever since. I did go away for 3 years. I was a professor at Cal State Long Beach from 2003 to 2006. And then when an opportunity came up to return to Ohio University as a faculty member, I returned in 2006. So that's a little bit about my professional background. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a licensed school counselor in Ohio. And as far as my primary identities, I would say that the roles of wife, mother, grandmother, daughter, and sister are important to me. And I identify as a South Asian first-generation immigrant. I am a cisgender woman, a heterosexual woman, and I think that those are the primary identities that have shaped my life.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience with us. It sounds like such a rich history, and we're happy to have you as part of our Ohio counseling history. And it sounds like that Ohio counseling history also now extends to the American Counseling Association history as well. How long have you been a part of that history?
I've been a member of ACA, I think, since my doctoral student days, so probably 2001 or 2002, I've maintained continuous membership. But most recently, I had the opportunity to serve on the ACA Governing Council as the Association for Specialists in Group Work representative. I'm currently in my third year as a representative on the ACA Governing Council. And that was a pretty eye opening experience for me to learn a little bit more about how ACA is run, how some decisions are made, and how committed people are to moving the profession forward.
You mentioned the profession, and as another counselor educator, I'm always encouraging my students to consider their purpose and their why. I'm interested, what was your purpose or your why in becoming a counselor?
I think that this goes back to my very early days when I was always in informal helping relationships with everyone around me. But I think as I grew and as I explored possible avenues, I realized that my heart lay in counseling. One of my earlier degrees, actually, two of my earlier degrees are in organizational psychology. And so that was part of my history, part of the work that I did. But I did not find it so fulfilling to be working for large corporations or organizations. At one stage, I worked for the Australian military. And I did not feel that that was my purpose in life. I think I'm much more passionate about being in helping relations with individuals, with groups, and of course, counselor education became my passion as I've progressed through.
So there was a desire for a more human connection, and then that connection with educating people to do the same thing. I like that.
I
Yeah.
think so. I think so. I think my students bring me great joy. And because I've been a counselor educator for a long time now, I just love hearing about how my students are doing and seeing how they progress in their careers and in their lives. It's very rewarding and fulfilling.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Can you tell us a little bit more about what initially got you involved with the Ohio Counseling Association?
Yeah, so I think most of my involvement in leadership has come specifically from people that I knew who tapped me on the shoulder and invited me to join, because I'm not so sure I would have gotten as involved as I did if it were not for key people in my life. So, as a student at Ohio University, it really became very evident to me that being involved in professional organizations was very important. And I had wonderful mentors in Dr. Tom Davis, Dr. Tom Sweeney, Dr. Richard Hasler. All of them emphasize the importance of professional service in organizations. And, I was so impressed with OCA, my first conference that I went to. I just felt like it was so big and so exciting to be in the company of fellow counselors. But my first leadership involvement in OCA was because of my friend and former fellow doctoral student at Ohio University, Dr. Jake Protivnak, who's at Youngstown State. So when Jake, I believe when he was going to be president, he asked me if I would be interested in serving OCA. And then we arrived at me being the professional development chair. And with that experience, I learned that I really liked working with people who share my passion for the profession, people who worked hard to accomplish common goals. And I went on then to serve as OCA president. I believe it was in 2012 to 2013.
That's great. So it was an evolution for you, it sounds like, but a powerful one. Um, in that evolution, when did you recognize that you wanted to pursue leadership at a national level?
Yes, so this is also a case, Marissa, of just people who reached out to me and asked me to be involved, and really a chance meeting. So I'll tell you quickly about how I became involved in ASGW, which was my national service that I've spent a lot of time in. So I was at an ACA conference. I can't remember the year, probably 2008. And I was rushing from one meeting to another, maybe. And I made eye contact with someone. We smiled at each other and we stopped to chat. And I found out that the person I'd smiled at, and she had smiled back at me, her name was Dr. Nilufer Merchant. She was a professor in Minnesota. She also happens to be from India originally. Nilufer was actively engaged in ASGW, and she was on her way to an ASGW business meeting. Now, at this stage, I was teaching group counseling, but I was not involved in ASGW. And so I decided to take a chance and go with her to the business meeting of ASGW. And that was the start of a long and wonderful professional relationship, which has also become a personal friendship with Nilufer. I think that ASGW works very hard to foster community and to create caring and welcoming ethos within the organization. So I felt very welcome there, which I had not always felt so welcome in other divisions that I'd visited. So, just very quickly, some of my service in ASGW, in addition to serving on various committees, I served as the process observer for a few years. And that was a very interesting experience. ASGW is one of the few organizations that has a process observer at their boards. And so the process observer doesn't is not a formal member of the board, doesn't have a vote, but the process observer works closely with the president to make sure that we stay on task, stay on agenda, but that we also focus on some of the hidden agendas that may be there, that we are aware of when a group might get stuck in talking about an issue, or when there's levels of fatigue in the room and a meeting might need to take a little break to come back and work on things. So I served as process observer for 2 terms under 2 different presidents in ASGW. And then that gave me such an interesting insight into the inner workings of that board. And when the opportunity came up to serve as president, I ended up serving for president, and then that led to representing ASGW on ACA Governing Council. So it really was a chance meeting with Dr. Nilufer Merchant.
That sounds like such a powerful experience by just a smile and turned into
Yes,
a really meaningful learning and growth experience for you
yes,
professionally and quite possibly personally. It seems like maybe as
yes,
well. So,
yes.
um, what I'm hearing you say when you shared that story is just by being there and showing up, sometimes there can be a shift in your trajectory, really, as
Yes, yeah.
well. So,
And I think also it's important for us to step out of our comfort zones, to say yes within reason, when our instinct might be to say, I don't know enough about this. Should I say no? And so I really encourage my students to say yes to professional opportunities, because you don't know where that might land you, and to continue to look for organizations and associations that really resonate with your interests and your goals, and organizations that you can really get on board with, where that organization wants to go, where you can be an important part. It's just like how, Marissa, you are now so involved in OCA and you're doing these podcasts, which is obviously something you like, but I think it's also really helping elevate the profile of OCA through
mhm,
this work that you're doing.
right. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that feedback. Um, I'm wondering if you have additional advice for students or newer professionals who might be looking for ways to, get involved specifically like at state or national levels, beyond some of the stuff that we just talked about. Like, is there any additional, words of wisdom for those folks?
Yes. I I think that students have to realize that organizations are run by volunteers. All of the counseling associations are run primarily by volunteers. There may be some paid employees, but that's pretty rare. So, one thing I would suggest to students, talk to your professors to ask about professional opportunities that they may be aware of. I think that it's really a great thing for students to do to reach out to current presidents or president elects of associations, because people are often looking for individuals to serve on committees. And I think that whenever leadership programs are offered, like OCA has such great leadership training, or other organizations have emerging leader programs, I think that it's important to do that. And I'd say to students, don't wait for somebody else to nominate you. I think it's perfectly all right for you to express your interest directly and to say, here's why I'd like to work on in your association or for your association. I want to caution students, however, not to spread themselves too thin, because I think that this is also a danger when you agree to do too many things and then you run out of time and you can't do them. So I'd say be judicious about what you say you're going to do. And then when you're on a committee, don't be afraid to show initiative and to share your ideas, because organizations are hungry for new ideas, and students of today are the leaders of tomorrow. And I don't think students often realize that, because they think may not have so much to offer. But if we as leaders don't understand what students and new professionals are needing and wanting and thinking about, then our organizations are not going to prosper.
Right. Their perspective is so valuable because they're shaping the field that we're really creating, like that's developing as we speak. So it's powerful. And it sounds like self-nominating is powerful too. So don't be afraid of that. That's really good advice. So you created a perfect segue by sharing thoughts about leadership, because my next question was really talking about how you define leadership. What's your definition of that?
I think to me, leadership is working and facilitating forward movement of goals of an organization. I think for me as a leader, providing support, encouragement, seeing what needs to be done, and finding financial and people resources to get it done is important. And I think as a leader, one should have a vision for the association, but that vision should be one that is commonly agreed upon rather than one that the leader has come to on their own. I think it's also important for leaders to understand the history of their organization or association and to understand what has done before, so that they're not constantly reinventing the wheel. And I really believe that it's important for leaders not to micromanage, but instead to be those who empower other individuals to bring their creativity to achieving common goals. I was very much impacted by the concept of servant leadership. Dr. Tom Sweeney was one of my professors when I was in the doctoral program. And as you know, Dr. Tom Sweeney was one of the founders of Chi Sigma Iota. And Chi Sigma Iota has really honed in and promoted the idea of service leadership. And service leadership is really about, as you were talking about earlier, maybe before we started recording, finding your why. Why do you want to lead? Is it about power and is it about personal gain? Or is your reason for leading because you truly want to help the organization, the association? You truly want to help the people who are members of that association. So I believe as a leader, it's really important to understand your current members and do what is needed to help them.
I love that. Yeah. And it's important that we give back to the profession, and that's part of what a leader would do and should do if that's what they're goal of leading is. So I love that. Wonderful. So switching gears a little bit, I I know that as counselors, we try to live in a strengths based world and really want to look at the positives, but we know that we do experience challenges and barriers within our field. What are some of the challenges that you think our profession is up against right now?
So I think that we really want to celebrate what's good in our profession, and there is a lot. So I think that one of the things that I'm so excited about is that counselors will now be able to bill under Medicare after the signing of the Mental Health Access Act that went into law in December of 2022. I think this is so huge for our profession and so exciting. And from what I understand, counselors will be able to register with Medicare and start being reimbursed by Medicare come January 2024, which will come along very soon. I think one of the challenges that we face is that we constantly, as counselors, have to fight for a seat at the table. We are one of the newer counseling professions or the newer helping professions. Professions such as psychology and social work have been around for a long time, longer than us. And so I think that one of the challenges is that we may get complacent when we look around at each other and think that we're doing well, but there are very real threats to our existence. And so one of the challenges I think that every counseling profession should focus on, professional should focus on, is uh, about having a strong counselor professional identity. I think that this is so crucial. Just yesterday, I learned about a new article that has come out in the Journal of Counselor Leadership and Advocacy, and they've made the article open access so that anyone can read it until May, and then after that, it will be available through JCLA. But I really encourage all OCA members to read that article. The authors are three powerhouse women: Dr. Holly Hartwig Moorhead, who's the CEO of Chi Sigma Iota, Dr. Sylvia Fernandez from KCREP, the CEO of KCREP, and Dr. Kelly Duncan, the CEO of ACES. And in it, they really spell out how important it is for us to be vigilant about maintaining our professional identity as counselors. Because there are, in some states, movements to permit students who study in psychology programs to become licensed as counselors. But that privilege does not extend the other way. So those who are trained in counseling programs cannot become psychologists. Those who train in counseling programs cannot be licensed as social workers. So I think that there are some things that we really have to focus on. And I don't know that we always pay attention to the bigger picture in our profession. I would say that one of the other challenges that we face is that our counselors don't often realize the value of belonging to professional organizations and associations. They often look at the cost of membership and think, well, I can do some other training with this money, or I don't need to belong. But I hope that people understand that it is by belonging to professional associations that we can have strong ways to advocate for our profession legislatively and with the public. And so I feel like this is something that we want to pay attention to. The Medicare reimbursement would not have happened without ACA's very diligent government affairs and I can't remember, it's GAP, government affairs and something related to public policy division. they work so hard over so many years, and people need to understand that their dues that they pay to associations are to for us to continue to strengthen our profession. It's our profession, counseling, and we need to be vigilant about that. So, to me, that is one of the challenges that I think is coming up. And I think that there have been some unintended consequences to the counseling compact, which I'm really supportive of. And I really appreciate the hard work that ACA has done for licensure portability. But with licensure portability, we also want to be aware that sometimes what can happen is with our deferring licensure laws that we can actually dilute licensure laws in states through the counseling compact. So that was a long answer, Marissa. As you can see, I'm fired up about
No,
this.
it's we
And so,
appreciate passion in this field. So we like hearing your voice, and I appreciate that response because it's talking about how our professional organizations represent our collective voice. And I think that shows that there's power in our professional identity, and what's so important about counselor professional identity is that collaborative voice. And I think that point is well taken, and well said. So I appreciate the response, and I think our listeners will as well. So, in your earlier part of the response, you said that there's so much to celebrate, and so that next question is, what exciting things, what things do you think should be celebrated in this field? What are we to be celebrating right now in the counseling profession?
so I think that the Counseling Compact and the Mental Health Access Act are two huge developments in our profession, and I think that it will be revolutionary for counselors. And I wanted to, I mentioned ACA's Government Affairs and Public Policy Division. I wanted to also give a shout out to Dr. Sean Gorby, who's doing some great work in OCA to help us keep focused on these important issues. So,
Yes, 100%.
yes, so I think that that's important. And I think that we often look at some of the negatives that have come out of the pandemic, but I think that one of the positives is that we realized that we can actually do counseling by remote means quite effectively. And that has improved access, I think, for people to be able to reach counselors. So I see that as a positive. Along with that positive, I think that there's training implications for counselor education programs and for counselors continuing professional education. So, but I see that as a positive overall. I think that counselors' efforts to focus on wellness and to focus on strengths are really important, and things that I believe are important for us to continue to utilize as we look at our own practices and the ways in which we engage with our clients and with each other. So I think that these are some of the good movements that I'm seeing happening in our field.
Wonderful. So, to continue on a more positive track, are there any folks within our field that you really admire, look up to, want to model, after model a career after, just say they're people to watch?
Let me think. I think within Ohio, some of the people who have been very inspiring to me, either because of their publications or because of their work in legislative advocacy. People who come to mind are Dr. Darcy Gronello, Dr. Vicky Kress from Youngstown, and then, of course, I mentioned Dr. Jake Protivnak earlier. I think Ohio has such a rich history, and I was fortunate enough to engage with some of those earlier leaders who were so instrumental in making sure that we have licensure for counselors in the state of Ohio. So, the late Dr. Susan Sears is someone who really inspired me with her passion. I spoke about my mentors previously at Ohio University, who are all amazing people. I think as a woman leader, ACA past presidents Dr. Patricia Arredondo and Dr. Marquita Evans were, I think, inspiring to me as I observed what they did and how they did it. And then the late Dr. Jane Myers from Kaising Mayota, also someone who's very inspiring. And, earlier I had talked about my chance meeting with Dr. Nilufer Merchant. I had a similar meeting with Dr. Jane Myers. It was the year that uh, ACA was in Cincinnati, and I happened to be the president that year. By the way, I hope ACA comes back to Ohio sometime because I think it's time. But I had to be up on stage to do the welcome as the state president, and then after that, I chatted to Dr. Jane Myers, and she said to me, Chris, one day you're going to be up there as ACA president, or you're going to be there as Kaising Mayota president. And I didn't really see that myself. And so I think that is the value of mentors, and it's the value of us being able to provide that encouragement and empowerment to people, to see in people the things that they may not see themselves. So, Dr. Jane Myers passed away, I think, a year or two after we had that encounter. And I've often remembered her words and her encouragement.
That's a really special story. That's and a good memory.
Yes.
So, the name of this podcast is Ohio Counseling Conversations. And so I've been making it a point to ask this question especially. What are important conversations counselors in Ohio or in general you think should be having with each other or having with their clients right now?
So I think that what I'm about to say is related to uh, some of the competition that we might face from social media and from organizations that are providing counseling, therapy, but may not actually have rigorous training or may not have licensed people providing that input. So I think with our clients, we may want to warn them about taking too much input from, for example, TikTok. I think that there's been such a rise in people self-diagnosing because of various social media postings that they have listened to or read. And while I think it's really important to demystify our profession and demystify mental health and diagnoses, I think that there's also a danger in having people consistently think that something is more wrong with them than there is. So I think that that's one of the issues that I've seen come up again and again in recent years.
Oh, you're speaking to me. That's topic I presented on at the recent All Ohio conference. So, yeah, I definitely think that's an important conversation. So, social media literacy is really important. Powerful conversations
Yes.
that I would wholeheartedly agree
Yes.
upon. So,
Yes, I'm sorry I missed your
no,
presentation, but it sounds like it was
happy to
awesome.
share the slides with you. Happy to share those with you. So,
Oh, please do.
but definitely,
Yeah.
I would agree. So, any additional passion projects or upcoming projects you're working on that you'd like to share with us?
I think that as far as my own scholarship goes, I've been recently doing some work in the area of psychological capital. Because I think that we need to have ways in which we as a profession can really help our clients tap into their own strengths and look at what's right with them rather than focusing on what's wrong with them, which is important. But psychological capital is something that has been of interest to me, and I actually uh, learned of psychological capital through one of my colleagues in my department who's in higher education and student affairs. And then we began to collaborate a little bit. And one of my former students, now a professor at the University of Texas in San Antonio, Dr. Priscilla Prasad, she began to research in this area, and I've worked with her on some projects. So, psychological capital is not something that is widely being used in our counseling field, and I think it has a lot of potential. It looks at the assets that we have as human beings, and they use the acronym HERO, which stands for hope, efficacy or self efficacy, resilience, and optimism. And there are specific ways in which we can really help our clients and each one of us really uh, build on those inner strengths and assets. So I like that approach. I think as I've gotten older, I've wanted to look more at can we do more widely to help people lead more fulfilling lives rather than to focus more narrowly on how do we help people who have a mental health diagnosis get through a very difficult time in their life and live with their mental health illness in a productive way. And I'm not saying that one is more important than the other. What I'm saying is this is something that I'm starting to feel more passionate about, and I think I feel more passionate about it because I've noticed that even with college students that I engage with regularly, undergrads as well as graduates, I think that I sense sometimes um, a sense of a little bit of hopelessness because we can get so overwhelmed with everything that's wrong in the world. And so I feel like it's important for us to reset, both for ourselves and for others, and to, in the brief and solution focused mindset, be actively looking for what's right and what can be developed in ourselves to be able to live more fulfilling lives.
Yeah, how can we instill some of that positivity to get unstuck from this negative situation that maybe we ourselves have found ourselves in, or the client has gotten stuck in as well. Okay, so the hero approach. I like that. That sounds like it could be really powerful. Okay. Um, well, I see that, with the announcement that you will take over as president-elect for ACA in July of this year, and then start your term as presidency in July 24. Curious, what are your hopes as you serve in these terms as president-elect and president?
I think that my ultimate goal in wanting to serve ACA was to ensure that counselors continue to thrive and that our profession continues to thrive. So I think that that will be what drives everything that I do. And, I think that ACA is a large association. There's employees of the association. And so I hope to have fruitful partnerships with the employees of ACA, including the CEO, to make sure that we stay true to the fact that we exist because we want to further the profession of counseling and to really listen to our members and to see what they need and to provide what they need.
I love that. I mean, I was looking as I was jotting down the notes and what hero meant, and I was thinking about how that could apply to the profession and how we thrive, and instilling all of that as we continue on in working to further the profession. So continuing to hope and believe in ourselves and be resilient and optimistic about the future of our profession. So, Chris, we're incredibly proud of you and excited that you will be representing, our profession and specifically Ohio counselors. Thank you so much for joining Ohio Counseling Conversations today. And again, we're so excited for you to represent us. Congratulations, and thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marissa, and thank you for your leadership of this project. Thank you, Kaylee, for all your help behind the scenes. I know that it is difficult to get projects like this off the ground and to sustain them. And I really thank you for your service to OCA. You're doing such a great job.
Thank you so much. And we appreciate all of you listening. We will be back next time. Have a good day. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to follow us so you can stay up to date with Ohio Counseling Conversations online and wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're a counselor in Ohio and would like to get involved as a part of production or as a guest, or know someone who might be interested, you can email us at ohiocounselingconversations@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.
This podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Counseling Association's Media, Public Relations, and Membership Committee and its podcast subcommittee. This episode was executive produced by Haley Fisher and Marissa Cargill. Research and fact-checking by Kaylee Bradley. Editing by Leah Wood. Original music by Elijah Satoru Wood. Special thanks to Stacey Tasmer, Sherdine Simpson, Dohi Kimopel, Alma Moore, Amy Barcelo, and Chase Morgan Swaney. Views, beliefs, or references mentioned in this episode do not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by the Ohio Counseling Association. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the podcast does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect the view of the Ohio Counseling Association or any of its officials. Thank you.